Good evening, guys. Welcome back to Ansarkari. So let's quickly start with our today's discussion for 16th of December. And we see that China builds ropeway roads near Tri Junction. So it is creating more infrastructure when it comes to the area of the Doklam region. And you can see clearly in the map. So I'll just focus more. So you can see that we have Sikkim here and Doklam Plateau. It is in the country of Bhutan and China's claim line. You can see the red dotted line is what the China claims at as its border. So this region, it's saying that it basically claims it to be part of China. Here you can see Tibet, here you have Nepal, we have Bangladesh, and this is the Siliguri corridor, which is also known as the Chicken's Neck corridor, and this is in the state of West Bengal. So firstly, here you should be knowing that the state of Sikkim shares borders with which all states and countries. So we can see very clearly it shares its borders with Nepal, China, Bhutan, and the state of West Bengal. And also you can find out the border states when it comes to the state of West Bengal and the countries with which it is sharing its borders. And next we see that states they can enact the laws when it comes to the Uniform Civil Code, and Article 44 of the Constitution talks about it. So it is the part of the DPSPs which is under Part 4 of the Constitution. So Article 44 of the Constitution, it provides that the state shall endeavor to secure for the citizens. You need to be careful, it is citizens and not people of the country, or we can say residents of India, and for the citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India. And the subjects such as succession, wills, joint family and partition, marriage and divorce, such subjects they are covered in entry 5 of list 3, that is the concurrent list of the 7th schedule, and that's why the states they are empowered to legislate upon such subjects under the uniform civil code. Then moving ahead. So, from the editorial section, this article is talking about the separation of powers in the Constitution, basically, the principle of non intervention. So, separation of powers between three organs, that is, legislature, executive, and the judiciary. So, here it is basically providing the point of view of our honorable president and vice president. So, our president, when she was there on 26 November celebrating our Constitution Day, she addressed the assembly and she said that the Constitution it outlines a map for good governance. The most crucial feature in this is the doctrine of separation of functions and powers of the three organs of the state, and it has been the hallmark of a republic that the three organs they have respected the boundaries set in place by the Constitution. Yet we can say with satisfaction and pride that the three they have always attempted to keep the boundaries in mind while doing their best to function in the service of the people. So these are her views, and when we talk about the views of our honorable vice president, he when he addressed the house for the first time on December 7, he said that democracy blossoms when its three facets scrupulously they adhere to their respective domains. So he said that we are indeed faced with this grim reality of frequent incursions. However, our president did not talk about such incursions in her speech, but Vice President is talking about this, and he focused on the Supreme Court's decision to strike down the 99th constitutional amendment setting up of the NJAC, that is the National Judicial Appointment Commission. And he added that we need to bear in mind that in democratic governance, basic of any basic structure is the prevalence of the primacy of the mandate of the people reflected in the parliament. So he's saying that even the basic structure has some basics, has some foundations, and which is the will of the people that is reflected by our parliament, the laws that are passed by the parliament. And the court basically it struck down NJAC saying that it violates the basic structure of the constitution. So he's saying that that the will of the parliament, that the will of the people that is reflected by the parliamentary decisions, that is even the basic of the basic structure that is we talk about when it comes to the constitution. And talking about certain, we can say a fact which is not related to this topic, but it becomes important from PT perspective, that is the vice president has the power of casting vote when it comes to equality of votes in a matter under the consideration of the Rajya Sabha. So the vice president who acts as the chairman of the Rajya Sabha, he has the powers of casting vote and basically deciding the final decision whenever there is a situation of equality in Rajya Sabha. And moving ahead, so is the RTI Act fulfilling its purpose? So RTI Act, as we know, it was passed in the Parliament in 2005, aiming to give people access to records of the central and state governments. And it was a vital reform to help the activists and individuals ensure transparency and accountability in the governance system. When we talk about whether it is fulfilling its purpose or not, we see that basically these are the views of the author Anjali Bhardwaj and Saurav Das. So Anjali Bhardwaj says that we have seen that a majority of the RTI applications, they are filed by people who are asking about their basic rights and entitlements. So this is one of the trends that we are seeing, and it is so it has fulfilled its purpose to that extent when it comes to people asking for their basic rights and entitlements, and they're filing RTI applications to fulfill the same. And the other thing is that to hold high offices to account, people they have used RTI law to know what is happening with taxpayers' money. And this has enabled them to expose the big ticket scams such as the Adarsh, Commonwealth Games, and Vyapam scams. So these were unearthed using the RTI applications. And so basically, one trend is showing fulfilling the basic rights and entitlements, and the other is towards, you can say, the major thing, the basically asking about what is or how are we utilizing the taxpayers money, where is it going. And it has helped in unearthing huge scams. So they've also been able to expose the human rights violations and then force accountability in those cases as well. So that is a trend, and as far as these two things are concerned, we see that RTI has been successful in fulfilling its purpose. and according to Saurav Das, he says that there are certain impediments and challenges. So that is, there is lack of awareness of this law amongst the people and lack of widespread adoption of it. So that is one the challenge. And is RTI ensuring transparency between the citizen and the government as it was intended to do? So is it fulfilling the objective of increasing transparency? So very cleverly, we see that public information officers these days, they use words like the division does not have the information. So they completely and they entirely shift the duty or the liability on the applicant to find out that which officer has the information which they are seeking for, which they are asking for. But this is absolutely not in consonance with the RTI Act, because the liability is on the officer to find out that this information is, it lies within which department, and it is not the responsibility of the applicant. So this is one thing that we see, that the RTI Act, it has failed in ensuring transparency. And also supposed, they're supposed to specifically refer to which section they're using to deny the information. So even that has to be specified. And when we see a large number of denials where the people, they're just told that this information cannot be provided, it is absolutely illegal. So we need a specific explanation that is obviously legal, and yeah, that's how it should be. And obviously it is not going that way, and that's how it is not able to fulfill its objective and criteria of increasing the transparency between government and the subjects. So another challenge when we talk about the RTI working and its effective implementation, we see that there are huge vacancies in the information commissions also. So we need to deal with this thing also. And let's move ahead. So, India test fires Agni 5 ballistic missile, which has a range of 5,000 kilometers, and it is a nuclear capable ballistic missile. And it was test fired from the APJ Abdul Kalam Island off the Odisha coast. So, you can find out its location, you can find out if any river passes by, if there is any lake nearby this island. And Agni 5, it can bring almost the entire Asia, including the northernmost part of China and regions in Europe under its striking range. So range is 5,000 kilometers. And yeah, then you should be knowing that Hatti community, it belongs to the state of Himachal Pradesh, and there are talks and discussions going on to give it the ST status, so scheduled tribe status. And that is we should be knowing about. Then talking about the public servants, if they are found, if they can be found guilty of graft, of we can say corruption and bribery on circumstantial proof. I'll again emphasize on the basis of they can be held guilty on the basis of circumstantial proof according to the Supreme Court. So the Constitution Bench of Supreme Court held that the demand and the acceptance of bribe or illegal gratification by a public servant can be inferred by a court on circumstantial proof in the absence of direct evidence. And corrupt officials, they have demoralizing effect on honest public servants. Then corruption by public servants, it has become a gigantic problem that we are dealing with, and we have to deal with. It retards the nation's nation building activities, and everyone has to suffer on that count. So that is one thing, one development. And World Bank report says that curbing air pollution in India, it needs efforts across entire South Asia, because obviously we know that air pollution is a problem, is a challenge which is not area or region specific, because it has no boundaries. So India has 6 large airsheds, some of them shared with Pakistan, between which the air pollutants, they keep on moving. And currently over 60% of South Asians, they are exposed to an average of 35 gram per cubic meter of PM 2.5 levels annually. And when we look at its concentration or the levels of PM 2.5 in the Indo-Gangetic plains, it even goes up till 100, and which is almost 20 times the upper limit of the safer limit, which has been recommended by the World Health Organization, which stands at 5 gram per cubic meters. So here you should be knowing about what is the safer limit, and this stands for PM 2.5, and find out what is the safer limit for PM 10. This can come in PT. And talking about the world news, so US created Indo-Pacific concept to contain China. This is what China has to say. We are seeing a change in their tone, and they say that there is no such concept as Indo-Pacific, which was created by the United States to bring in partners such as India to contain China. And this reflects Beijing's hardening opposition to both Washington's Indo-Pacific strategy as well as regional groupings such as the Quad. So we discussed about this point, and we discussed this as a part of our discussion when we were basically talking about the taking into consideration the impacts or the policy decisions that we are taking in the context of the results that we are getting from the China test. So when we talked about that thing, we were basically discussing that since India is basically, we can say that we are having, or we are our relations, they have evolved in a much positive, in a very strengthened and democratic way with US. So obviously China is going to have a problem with that, and India cannot completely side with US, because we share land border with China, and obviously we have a security threat when it comes to that, and obviously we need to take that thing into account. So when we are taking our foreign policy decisions, so that is, we are seeing right now what China is saying about the role that US is trying to play in the Indo-Pacific region, and even it is not satisfied the naming of that region. So that's how it is. And we see that recently US Fed policymakers, they see higher interest rates for a longer time period. Like basically people, they were expecting a softer stand this time, because we see that the inflation rate, it has fallen down. So we were expecting a softer stand when it comes to the Fed, but it was absolutely opposite of that. And because of that, we see that our stock market, the Sensex, it has fallen by 1.4%. That is huge. And also our rupee, it has weakened, and it still remains amongst the weakest currencies. So we see that uh, recession fears, they in the global economies, they have grown after the Fed's comments, and there is a dip in the IT stocks led by the pessimism in the domestic market. Then demand for dollars, it remains strong, and rupee may trade between around 82.25 and 83 in the near term. This is what the analysts have to say. So you should be knowing about these current developments. These are very important for your understanding and for obviously for your general awareness. And when we talk about the home prices set for steep 6 to 10% jump this fiscal year, this is what the Crystal has to say. And the factors responsible for this jump are the steep rise in the raw material, labor, and land cost, and relatively favorable demand supply dynamics also. So that is, we can say, a positive news for the builders, but obviously not for the home buyers. And let's take up the Mint. So here again, the US Fed rate hike is being discussed. And it is in this graph, firstly, we'll be seeing that you can see this orange line, which is showing the retail inflation in the US. So you can see that it is moving downwards. So basically, the inflation is cooling down, but still it is at a much higher level, which is at 7.11%. And the effective federal funds rates, which is shown by this blue line, it has increased to 3.78%. So that is one thing. And the US Federal Reserve, it has increased the federal funds rate by 50 basis points, and which is the highest in the 15 years. So let's see more about this. So the Fed has been it has been raising the rates, and we see that in order to control the steep inflation in US, their central bank, which is known as the Federal Reserve, it has raised the funds rate 7 times this year, and the last four increases before the latest increase were of 75 basis points each. This was lower than that, and we see that the retail inflation in US in this cycle is peaked at a high of 9.1% in June. And then we have, it is so the chairman of the Fed said that the inflation data received for October and November, they show a welcome reduction in the monthly pace of price increases. We see that inflation is slowly moving down when it comes to the US economy, but it will take substantially more evidence to give confidence that inflation is on a sustained downward path. So that's again, we cannot celebrate that since inflation is cooling down, so the trend has been shifted downward. So we need to wait, we need to have some patience as of now to get it verified through the data for the coming period ahead. And also when it comes to the Indian economy, we are seeing that inflation is cooling down. So the most important thing here for us is, what does all this mean for India? How is it going to impact India and us? So higher interest rates in the US, they encourage the investors to move from different parts of the world, including India, to the US. Now, why this? Because obviously when the interest rates would be higher in US, they would be increased in US. The investors who had invested in different countries and different capital markets, they would be withdrawing, they would be exiting, and they would be parking their funds in the home countries where they are being assured of higher interest rate returns. So that is going to be negative for the country from where they are withdrawing, and obviously this puts pressure on the domestic currency of that particular country from where they are withdrawing, and it leads to the currency depreciation. And that we are seeing that the Indian rupee, it has depreciated by almost 10%, and it is one of the weakest currencies. Then it has already been playing out, and a weaker rupee, it makes imported goods expensive, and it feeds into retail inflation. So basically this is known as imported inflation. Obviously, when the domestic currency, when the exchange rate depreciates, our exports, they become more competitive and imports become more expensive. So that is called, when we are importing goods, they are expensive, they are at higher prices, so that is known as imported inflation. And that's how negatively it impacts the domestic economy. And US basically, it ends up exporting inflation to other parts of the world, and in this scenario the RBI, it may be forced to raise the rates further in future to slow down the process of depreciation of the rupee. So that's how it is going to, and it is still impacting our economy, our country. And you should be clear about all the the manner in which it can influence our economy, the impact it has on our exchange rate. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for joining in, Sarkari. See you tomorrow, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel. Yeah, thank you for joining.